So do you
All
want me
right.
to pronounce the title so that we'll have it pronounced correctly at least once?
No.
Okay.
If somebody
'Cause I can.
corrects me, they're interacting.
That's true. Yeah, that was a variety of pronunciations.
Nobody,
there.
everybody knows you know how to speak French.
Okay.
Nobody's going to say
not nice,
Erin did.
Eric.
No, Erin. Nobody's going to say Erin didn't. Erin didn't correct her. Maybe she doesn't know how to speak French.
I'm not worried about that. I just,
I know. I'm teasing. I know you know.
Erin, I want to hear you say that.
Okay. Jeanne Dielman, 23 quai de commerce, 1080 à Bruxelles. Had to remember the title.
That sounded like what I said. I don't know. It didn't sound any different to me. But I don't speak French, so I don't know the difference.
The funny thing is that Erin said that so French that she even did the thing that they like to do with names that are not French. Because Dielman is not French, but they pronounce it as if it were French.
Yeah. Dielman.
Yeah, very, very.
All right, tell you what. I'm going to extract that and make that a little Easter egg at the end.
Okay.
Because I love you.
The name of the film is Jeanne Dielman, 23 quai du commerce, 1080 Bruxelles. It's not that hard.
My first viewing of this film came in 1990 when I was volunteering as an usher at a showing, and I distinctly remember going to the organizer of the event and saying, "You don't have enough room for as many people as there are," because there were people standing in the aisles. And he said, "Just wait 15 minutes. There'll be plenty of room." And he was right. I would say 13 minutes was enough to clear out more than half the audience. And he invited me, because it had cleared out so much, to watch the film from up in the projection booth. And directly below us, in the very back row, was this woman with a southern accent. I wrote down a few of the things that she said, but she was literally talking the entire film. So, like, for instance, the opening scene happens, and Jeanne Dielman takes the visitor's coat, and they go to the bedroom and puts the money in a bowl. I think she's a prostitute. Son comes home, and the woman says, "Boy, hang up your own damn coat." And then the very important and central scene that we're going to get to, when the boy says he couldn't sleep with anyone he didn't love, I heard her pop up so incredibly loud. "That's right, hold out for the right one." And we get to where the screen says end of first day, and she says, "First day of what?"
First day of the film.
Next morning, Jeanne Dielman is polishing the shoes, and she's back on that poor boy. "Oh, polish your own damn shoes, you're grown." So she's watching the baby, and she turns to whoever she's with and says, "If anything happens to that baby, we're leaving."
Such a relatable statement. I like this lady.
And then
so far.
and then the baby leaves. There's a bit of relief, but then the other client comes over and goes, "Another one."
You have that long sequence where Jeanne Dielman's peeling those potatoes with a knife.
So get yourself a peeler. You're going to cut your thumb clean off. She's polishing the shoes again. And then the brush drops. And there was this audible gasp, like a killer was coming out of a closet or something. "She dropped the brush!" And then when something's wrong with the coffee and she's snipping the dairy bottle, it's not the milk, it's not the milk. She's watching the neighbor's kid again. She turns to the guy or gal, I don't know who, next to her and says, "I just know something's going to happen to that baby." And again, you could hear this audible sigh of relief when the neighbor came and picked the kid up. Then that very important scene where she goes to the coffee shop and someone's in her usual seat and she has to get a different waitress. The empathy in her voice. "I hate it when that happens. It's just not your day, sweetie." But then she got judgmental again when she's unwrapping the pink blouse and she holds it up. She said, "That's just an ugly color." That final sequence, everybody else is just in rapt silence. You don't hear even the muttering or, popcorn chewing or what have you. And when you see the John she's with laying on top of her, and all of a sudden I heard, "Is he sleeping? I think he's sleeping." And you see her, she crosses the room.
Still.
And she picks up the scissors, the same ones she opened the thing with the blouse with.
Yes.
And I heard, "Oh, honey, no." But then for that last 8 minutes of the film, where John's just sitting silently at the table, the woman goes completely silent. All of a sudden I heard, "I need to watch that again. I think I missed some stuff." To which I replied from all the way up in the projection booth, No, ma'am, you most certainly did not. I'm Eric Trommater.
I'm Erin Brown.
And I'm Sila Blume.
And this is World Cinema History. This week, Jeanne Dielman, 23 quai du Commerce, 14 Bruxelles, directed by Chantel Ackerman and starring Delphine Seyrig. And Erin, this was your choice this week, so tell us, what made you choose Jeanne Dielman, 23 quai du Commerce, 14 Bruxelles as a film for us to watch? And were you aware that it was the #1 film of all time according to the most recent 2022 Sight and Sound poll when you chose it?
I wasn't aware. I heard something about it online. I don't remember what I was looking up, but then someone mentioned this as being a great film, and so I was like, "Hey, it's on HBO. I can go watch it." So I watched it, and it's amazing how it draws you in, because not a whole lot happens, but her world is so internal, and everything is so precise, and she has her routine, and it has to be a certain way, and it's going to be like this, and if anything goes wrong, everything collapses, and you can see that collapse start. I watched it, and it didn't feel like a 3-hour film to me, even though it was, and there were long stretches of her just peeling potatoes or scrubbing the bathtub, things like that.
Or those fucking shoes.
Oh, God, those shoes. Okay, that kid, Sylvain, her son, is a piece of shit. He pissed me off, but I'll get back to that later. But yeah, she had to shine the shoes, and then she dropped the brush, and that's part of it, that you realize something is wrong, and her face is very still the entire film. She doesn't have a lot of change to her expressions, but there's a lot going on internally that you see when something isn't right. And so when I finished watching it, I had a lot of questions about it, and I just kept thinking about this movie, and I wanted to talk to somebody about it, but most people I know haven't seen it, so I brought it up because I'm like,
this. And that's why something... we're friends, Erin. That's what I'm here for.
Well, that's what I was thinking, is like, hey, we can talk about this movie on the podcast and actually know what we're talking about and share our thoughts with the world about this film, because it sticks with you. It's amazing.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Sila Blume, but I'm going to first caveat emptor. I have absolutely no idea what this movie is about, so...
Are you serious?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
No, I'm not. But I don't think I understand this film as well as the people who voted it the best film of all time. But we'll get to that. I also don't think it's a film that benefits from repeat viewings the way some of the films that we discussed do, because it is so slowly paced that it gives you a lot more time to breathe, to understand what's going on in a scene. And so I don't think there's a lot of benefit from going back. Sila, Yazzie and I have made up. We're friends again. And I mentioned that we were doing this on the show. And she said, if you got to watch it again, you can just watch it and fast forward. Because you won't miss anything. But I did think of you a few times while I was rewatching this for a couple of reasons. And number one, you have spoken many times about your exploration of why people need narratives as a gimmick to hold on to, and is storytelling as important as people, or do people put too much of a stress on storytelling on the one hand? But then I also thought about some of those Sam Benny films that we talked about and our irritation at his tendency to have, when someone opens a briefcase, every single part of the process of the setting down and the opening of the briefcase and all of that, and how primitive it made his films look. But I wonder, because just like Erin, I wasn't bothered by that, and I think a lot of that has to do with the very painterly, like, artistic framing. But which side was it, the non-narrative or the staring at statues part of this film that got to you? Because again, and I'm just using Sam Benny because those films obviously aren't done anywhere near at the level of artistic achievement that this is, simply because he just didn't have access to, the type of photography or what have you. But I'm wondering, when you see it done like this well, if it worked for you as someone who kind of has, maybe, I'm not going to say a hostility, but at less of an interest in the gimmick of narrative filmmaking.
This, for me, is a very, very interesting experiment as to what cinema is or can be. And this, I don't mean this negatively. I don't think a film like that could ever be the best film ever. It's not possible. This, for me, is not a story. This, for me, is the witnessing and experimentation and the living, pure, straight, raw living of the different steps that I would need to perceive a tooth of garlic. Meaning the way I peel it, or the way I buy it, then the way I peel it, the way I might even cook it or just eat it, and the perception of the details of this little piece of garlic. Period. That's it. There's no story. There's no plot. There's nothing. It's just the raw experience of what happens when the son starts talking about who he would make love to. And before that, the mentioning of the aunt that lives somewhere in Canada. And as a result, and because of certain details that for me brilliantly in the face acting, if there's such a thing as face acting, but I think you know what I mean. She is able to convey an incredible density of what she's going through, even though she's actually very numb to it on her face or her actions. But she's actually, you could tell there's a lot of things going on when she reads this very, very stupid letter, but brings certain things up that lead to where she is and apparently to the situation with her child. And for this reason, I cannot, even though I feel the same way, that kid is much too old, much too old. I was doing those things when I was 5 or 6 already. Those were duties that I had, to clean the shoes of the whole family, certain days of the week. And it's just amazing. And the fact that nobody says thank you to each other, part of this very subtle, very intense, almost a little bit more uncomfortable than anything that Bergman ever did, is that I cannot blame the kid for anything, because there's a lot of things going on that in their own way, in their very primitive own way, but also, which is something that I have very lively in my system, when I watch from the beginning to the end, I see so clearly the aesthetics, the culture of the Belgian people. I lived there 5 years. It is so typical It is so dark and depressing, but that's the way I experience a lot of Belgian people in their houses, many times in galleries, in museums. That it is so typical Belgium. So I really don't blame the child for this. I don't blame anyone. I believe there are so many difficult circumstances that have taken place. I find this to be a very profound study of what it means to perceive a piece of garlic from beginning to end. Not more.
I'm going to rub against your idea of this not having a story. Now, I do have the benefit. I watched on Criterion the excellent, by the way, documentary. It's all shot in black and white by Sam Frey called Auteur Jeanne Dielman, where you see behind the scenes Chantel Ackerman discussing the role with Delphine Seyrig and why she does the things that she does, so that you get it kind of into the mentality that she's trying to create. And one of the things she talks about is that she was really inspired by her mother, who was a Jew and an Auschwitz survivor who lost her parents at Auschwitz in World War II. And with that as a background, and the entire documentary is really Seyrig, who just is, absolutely ravishingly beautiful, sitting with a cigarette and a cigarette holder, questioning every single thing that Ackerman does. And it really creates the film in a way, because she's making Ackerman defend her choices. So, for instance, how many times she brushes her hair. She said, why does she brush her hair that many times? And Ackerman says, because that's the number of times I said she brushes her hair. And then Seyrig realizes, that's how you brush your hair, isn't it? And it made me realize that there is a real solid story here, but it's told in codas. So you have the little codas set up in the what became later called slow cinema style, where you see the regiment of her daily life, and each shot is framed perfectly. The rule of thirds is beautifully framed, but the shots are set up exactly the same for the next day when things start to go wrong. And so where you see Seyrig in a different part of the frame, but the framing is exactly the same. And it's her movement in the frame that is telling that story through these visual codas. So when she returns to the coffee shop and someone is in her seat, you see her actually sitting in the other side of the rule of thirds with someone in the seat that we saw her before. But the camera is in the exact same position it was before, and the shot is exactly the same frame. And this is so it is telling a story, but it is using a different way of telling us that story. And it is these visual cues. And I think it's also interesting that she chose Delphine Seyrig for almost what is a silent movie pantomime type performance.
It's an excellent point. Yes.
For me, last year at Marienbad, which is, I think, what I know Seyrig most for, it was ultimately she was put in all of these Christian Dior fabrics and used as almost a living mannequin by Alain Resnais, the director of that film. And this is almost the opposite of that, where she's dressed down and made dowdy, but she's really just a mannequin put in these perfectly, very painterly composed shots and put through the codas of her life.
This is why, and I think you all would agree, this is why we have these conversations for years. I think we are both right, but that brings me to a third point. I would say, and in a way, it's only semantics what we're doing right now, the last 5 minutes. I would say although I'm not a film expert and you are. But the third point I want to mention is I would formulate it that there are stories in there. There are stories about her. There are stories about her son, Sylvian. But to me, the film is not about telling that story or telling a story. There are stories in there, but the film is not telling a story. I would phrase that so.
Well, again, and there's no right or wrong here. We'll agree to disagree. I think the film is about telling that story. I think the narrative technique that she is using, and it harkens back more to the experience of some, I think, very bad experimental movies, the Andy Warhol type films where he would just film like the Empire State Building for 15 hours and expect people to sit through, which I thought were just kind of a test for who's the phoniest. If you, you know,
I'm sorry, I have to get rid of this. I think the disturbance, the incredible high level of disturbance that I don't know if about we, but I perceive in the woman as a character, as a person, and the son, who's already in his early 20s, perhaps, the incredible disturbance that I have to assume behind these lives tells me that I cannot read a story because we are just touching the very, very thin surface, because the film itself is about so much disturbance, psychological disturbance, and other types of that. That's why I think that's the bottom line for me. When I speak about the story problem, I'm just basically saying I see so much profound love and disturbance in these characters that the story for me can never go to the point of telling that story as it is, because that is just too much there. I think this film is so minimal. And the same thing happens with the sculptures of Richard Serra or paintings of Joseph Marioni or any minimalist, and even sometimes in music, minimal music. There is so much in there that when you reduce it, you make a lot more out of it because it has been reduced. And this film is really, really very, very reduced.
And the slow pacing allows you to take all of that in. Again,
yes.
Which is why I don't think I benefited from repeat viewings the way that I did from, and I'm not talking about that very first viewing with the talking lady, obviously, but the first time I was able to sit down and watch this film and appreciate it as a film student, probably I got the most out of it. But I'm going to turn to Erin Brown, because you're someone who talks a lot about autism and the autistic spectrum, and I'm using the phrase coda, but you know, the little set pieces of this film are all made to allow you as a viewer to become used to the rhythms and the rigidity of of this life, and to see the smallest things. You know, the woman in the audience gasping when that brush got dropped was because we had been watching in repetitive motion these type of little things. And I was wondering if you picked up on a sense of kind of an autistic way of taking control of your life through these almost like tics that the Jeanne Dielman character has, and that are enacted by Delphine Seyrig in this wonderful kind of pantomime way.
I got a really strong sense of neurodivergency from the character, and I got that from the second watching, because I am on the spectrum. I don't always pick things up the first time through, especially with people's facial expressions and body language. So I do benefit from watching things more than once, including this one, where I picked up on more that I just hadn't noticed the first time through. And one of the things I did pick up on was she's so tied to her schedule. Things have to go a certain way at a certain time. And if it's not right, it throws her off. And that's a very autistic trait.
What do you think threw her off in this? Because it is, things start to unspiral, and there are some central events. I have a theory, and I'm going to tell you that there is also an answer in that documentary, even though it's Chantel Ackerman's answer. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right for all viewers. I'm not one of these death of the author type people, but if it's not on the screen, it doesn't necessarily inform it. Now, Ackerman says that on the second day, when the door closes, something happens behind that door, and it throws her off. And she claims that what happens is her second client had given her an orgasm for the first time in her life, and it's thrown her completely off. And that's what, spoiler alert, results in a man losing his life at the end of this film. I don't think that's too big a spoiler, because I doubt very, very highly that you're going to sit through a 3-hour and 20-minute movie and say, "Oh, the guy died." But anyway, but I never saw that in the film itself. That I'm getting that from Ackerman. In the film itself, I think it's the accumulation of little things, dropping the brush, that search for the button, and she's looking for a particular button that's missing, and she can't mash the buttons, and someone tells her, "Well, wouldn't it be easier to just get new buttons for all of them than to try and track down this one button?" And she's like, "No, I just have to find him replaced." Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you going to the extra, and again, that's why I turned to you on the spectrum thing. But is there an event you pictured, and then I'll turn to Sila, as being kind of the beginning of this unwinding, which, again, spoiler alert, ends with a man losing his life and getting a pair of scissors stuck into his neck?
I had to look up as much stuff as I could find, reviews and things about this film, to see what I was missing. Because again, autism, I miss things easily. And I did see where Chantal Ackerman said she had an orgasm. And you can tell that that's when it happened, that something had happened, because she comes out and her hair is messed up. And she's always so precise, and everything is so perfectly neat and clean, but her hair is messed up, and she's burned the potatoes. And she finds the potatoes and has to do something with them, and doesn't know what to do with this pot of burned potatoes. And she even goes into the bathroom with it and then stops and comes back into the kitchen with it. She just moves around all over the house trying to figure out what to do with these potatoes, because she's so unsettled by whatever happened in the bedroom. And if that was her first orgasm of her life, that's really sad. And it says a lot about why she would be so disturbed, because think about, she was married, she's a widow, and she has a child. So obviously she had relations with her husband, and were they always bad? That's horrible. It's not just autism. I think there's OCD involved, and OCD means you have a lot of rituals, because if you don't follow these specific rituals, something bad is going to happen. So she's already lost her husband.
If I don't flip the light exactly 6 times, my whole family will die. I mean,
exactly.
And I don't know that for sure, but do you really want me to risk that?
Exactly. That's what it's like. Spoiler alert, I have OCD. I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but I do. And there's some nebulous, terrible thing that's going to happen if you don't put your right shoe on before your left foot every day, and so it feels like her husband died, and she has to have control over her life. And she's gained this control with all these little rituals, these little things she has to do, and the schedule she has to stick with. And she can't change the buttons on the coat, because, the world will implode. So she has to get the exact right button, or terrible things are going to happen. And then finally, at the end of it, a terrible thing does happen, but she's the one in control of it. It's wild.
Well, and before I get back to Sila, there are millions of people with some form of spectral autism or some form of OCD who don't stab men in the neck. So there is something different here. Something else unspirals her, or we're dealing with a more severe mental disorder than autism or OCD. Well, Erin, first let's just clear the air. You have yet to have put the scissors into. Although I do remember a couple of times when you were still married where you probably wanted to.
Oh God, yes. Divorce was the better option. Stabbing the guy in the neck was her regaining control because she started to spiral after the second John, and all these little things kept happening and building up, and she gets to the point where with the third guy, when he's just laying on her in the most awkward sex I've ever seen on film, it was so uncomfortable to look at. It looks like she starts to have another orgasm and doesn't want to, and she wants him to get off of her, but she's not sure she wants him to, but she does and she doesn't, and finally she covers her face with her blanket, and it felt like she was very ashamed in the moment of what had happened, and the only way for her to take that power back was to kill the guy. I think that's what where her mind was going. It doesn't mean it's right. It means that the story of the film, in my opinion, is her breakdown over those 3 days. And that was her ultimate breakdown. And then she goes and sits at the table, and then she has to deal with what she just did. And you can't tell what she's thinking, but rationally, she's got to be thinking about what's going to happen next. What should she do now? It's, she's gone through something serious. And honestly, if you get to her age as a woman and you've never had an orgasm, and when you do, it's with someone you have no feelings for whatsoever, that would be unsettling as hell, So that's my opinion.
Okay, well, Sila, obviously something probably did happen behind that door, but because Ackerman never shows us, and outside of discussion of this film, we would have no way of knowing that. What was your perception of what, because this was, you saw this film basically rather cold, but what was your perception of what had caused the unraveling for that second half of the film?
Well, I thought after watching the film, I thought of reading something about it. As Erin said before, I was curious as to what I might have missed, and I decided against it. And every couple of hours or every couple of minutes before we got to this room, I kept thinking about this room we're going to do, and my reflections on the film. And every time I thought of it, I felt very comfortable with the little I know, because I felt that is fine that way. But during the film, when I started noticing a breakdown, which happens, I guess, at some point in the middle or the beginning of the second day, if I remember correctly, I already noticed right away, and I started asking myself, what is going on? Why is she breaking down? And with your question, I come to two possibilities. One is either in one or on two occasions or on both occasions, the son says certain things that open her mind to what he perceives, to the way he perceives her life right now, and to the mistakes she might have made in earlier times, either before the marriage or after at some point. So for me, either one or both of the conversations that he has with her, especially the one when he's in bed and is very, very almost dead emotionally. The content is very emotional, but his expression is very weird, very neutral. I believe that the moment she goes to her room and seems confused about the time on her alarm clock, I read that as one of the men did not show up, and that threw her off. So for me, I was going back and forth between those two possibilities. Some of the things the son has said has brought her to think about her situation now and the situation before, and also that one of her customers did not show up, which of course implies she doesn't have that money she's counting on, and she has, as you both already alluded to, everything is regimented. Everything has to be in its own, it's in its place.
And again, the way she films this with the single static shots, each one where the camera's in the exact same position, and you're having her go through the same motions but differently, gives you that room to breathe and to notice that things are just that slight bit off. So you're not being told, it's not explicit, but you know it just as well as if you had, say, Travis Bickle writing in his diary, everything's a little bit off today, I don't understand why. Did you feel like this was a feminist film? So Ackerman has a record of kind of making feminist film, and it is herself, or was herself until her suicide at age 65, a queer filmmaker. Did you feel like this existed in a feminist universe? Was it telling a feminist story? This idea of the drudgery of housework and the rigor and what have you, or is this a story that kind of exists outside of time, outside of politics in that way?
I definitely think it's a feminist film. Showing the work that she does and spending so much time on it helps you see how much women actually do, but nobody thinks about it as being actual work. And her relationship with her son, he's such a twit. He doesn't appreciate what she does. He doesn't, like Sila said, never thanks her. He doesn't do anything on his own. She shines his shoes. She makes his breakfast. She makes his dinner. He complains about everything. On the second day when her hair is messed up, the first thing he says to her when he sees her is, "Your hair is messed up." Oh, good. Okay. The next day she's got her housecoat misbuttoned and he points out she's missing a button. It's like...
Well, let's go back to that scene for a moment, because she's not sitting in the living room in the exact position that she normally is when he comes home, and he notices that. He is regimented her life almost as much as she has regimented his.
They do have sort of a codependent relationship. She raised him this way, but also, society did. We don't know what her late husband was like. We don't know if he learned to treat her this way from him. But she does everything for him, and I think that that's how she was raised. Is this is what you do? You do everything for men. None of the men that she encounters treats her very respectfully. She goes to the shoe shop to get Sylvain's shoes resold, and the guy behind the counter keeps talking over her and asking questions about her son. Nothing about her, but talks over her about stuff and interrupts her all the time and asks about her son and things like that. He's polite enough, but only in the sense of he's not overtly saying rude things to her. His demeanor toward her is very patronizing, I think. And then, of course, her son expects her to do everything for him, and she does it. She could stand up to him, but she doesn't. She's used to this. This is what she's going to do. This is how she feels useful, I think. And then she's got the guys that pay for sex. She goes to the post office on, it's the third day when things are starting to go wrong, and it's closed, and she needs to buy stamps, and the stamp machine's not working, and those three guys walk past and kind of laugh at her, like, "Oh, is it all out of stamps? Ha, 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 ha." Like, what was that about? Did she need that in her life? Why did they need to comment on anything she was doing? And I think every woman has encountered something along those lines. So the thing about the guys commenting on her trying to get stamps, when you're female, when an AFAB person, a person who identifies as a woman, you will get comments that you don't want all of the time from guys who think that they have the right to tell you things that you don't need to hear. They don't do it to other men. you get assholes sometimes, but you don't have somebody going past you yelling at you to smile. You don't, have people commenting on how you look, how you drive, how you walk, if you're doing something and they decide to have a problem with it, or they want to tell you how to. You've never had a guy come up to you at a gym and tell you that you're working out wrong because you're not working out like he is. You've never had your earbuds in and had somebody come over and tell you to take them out so that they can ask you, some stupid question that they know the answer to, but they want to talk to you. And it's this constant harassment that women face. It's a power imbalance, because I think Margaret Atwood said, men are afraid that women will embarrass them. Women are afraid men will kill them. That's the dynamic we're dealing with. Most women have some innate fear of men on some level, and that's universal. And that's what this is showing. Is like, here's these guys, these entitled dickheads who want to comment on her trying to get stamps. They didn't need to say anything, but they did. And that happens all the time. So anyway, so like every man that she encounters in this film is disrespectful or dissatisfied, or just straight up rude. I mean, even the baby won't stop crying when she's trying to calm him down. And I don't blame the baby. He's a baby, but it's a male baby. So it's just all the men in her life treat her like shit. And she just takes it, until she does.
So I guess we're all agreed men are pigs and we'd never fuck one. Okay, Sila, I'm keeping that in the podcast.
Okay.
Sila, I was when Erin brought this film up, I was excited to try and get you involved in this. You could give us a little bit more of an idea of how this catches life, especially in Brussels. There were some little things that I think I missed. For instance, the son speaks French, but he's going to I think it was either a Flemish or a German-speaking school. Because his friend is going to one. And that's something that maybe someone like myself who I don't believe I've ever actually been to Brussels, but it is a trilingual city and it's a trilingual society. And they and how they rub against each other, and that's just one example of little things that I may not have understood in this film that somebody who has more of an experience there might. So, were there some things in here that you were like, oh yeah, they got that right?
I wanted to make a comment about the way she is treated, especially by the Schuster, the guy at the shoe shop. I cannot disagree with his disrespect towards her. However, I only see that because of your comments, Erin. I saw the Belgian society, which doesn't mean that the chauvinist pig is non-existent. That does not destroy that aspect of the society. But there's an incredible, and I saw that throughout the film, there's an incredible function, the way she orders coffee, the way the woman comes to her. There are very particular ways of doing that in Belgium. They have very particular ways of how to order things, how to serve things, which you will not encounter in Vienna. It's just different. And it did confuse me a lot, the comments of the three guys about the stamps, because I said, what's this about? I had no idea. I wanted to go back and watch it to see what did they say? I didn't. It really was really weird for me, that scene. But I think that's the main thing that I would say to that. Also, I don't speak French. I've had conversations in French, but I would never dare to say that I speak the language. However, I saw a film not too long ago, and also this film, which explains why. I know that he speaks a very weird French. She speaks, to me, more acceptable, more commonly sounds I would say. But so I was very surprised about that because I'm trying to figure out
Well, he speaks almost with he speaks French with almost like a South African accent to me.
And that makes no sense.
I don't know why. I'm not saying it made sense. I'm
No,
just saying that's what it sounded like.
No, I know. But I'm saying it would make no sense in terms of the film because I am not hearing anything that tells me where these people are from. I do not hear them speaking Dutch. I do not hear them speaking Flemish. I do not hear them speaking French as naturals, especially
do you
him.
think there's a significance to the fact that he is in a French-speaking household, but has chosen, against his mother's wishes, to attend a school that I believe I don't think they're specific in whether it's German or Flemish, but I believe it's supposed to be a Flemish-speaking school, just so that he can attend. So he's literally attending school in a different language than he speaks every day.
Yes, but then I ask myself, why don't I hear them speak not a single word of Flemish? And to your point, which I'm not trying to make a big fuss about this, but it is really not a 3-language society. It is a 2-language society. The Germans, for obvious reasons, are pushed aside, and I know that from Germans who lived in certain parts of Belgium, and they spoke about how they are treated. So the society in Belgium is really French Flemish or French Dutch, whatever you want to call that language. But it's officially Flemish. However,
the last time they invited the Germans in, it didn't work out too well for them.
Yeah, okay, but I heard from a German about 20 years ago. I spoke with him, and he was telling me the stories about how it was for him 20 years before he met me, how it was for him to go to the post office or to the government office and the way they were treated. So, but that's a completely different topic. And I just wanted to mention the powerhouse in Brussels is the Dutch Flemish, not the French Wallon. That's a powerhouse. They are the ones with the money. They are the ones with the say. They are the ones with the power. That's the way I was always given to understand the dynamic between the French part and the Dutch part of Belgium. So
the lingua franca of Belgium is still French at this point, correct? On the streets, among common people.
This is difficult.
I'm asking. I don't know.
No, this is difficult because there are two very strong layers in this question. One is in Brussels, that is not just the center of power for Belgium, but also the center of certain powers for Europe. Their mentality is strongly Dutch Flemish. But I lived in Liège, which is perhaps the most lively city of the Wallonie, or the French-speaking Belgiums. And there, it is very, very, very usual, very common to hear people speak Wallon. When you're in Brussels, you will not hear that because then you are in a different society level, and that you're not going to speak Wallon because it's not really, they're not going to spank you for it, but it's not really. Brussels has always a very high-end mentality, and that will not exist in Namur or in Liège, because that's where you practice what you are, and that is Wallon. And that you say autant instead of 4 times 20. They don't have 4 times 20 in Liège. They say autant, which is 80. So there's quite a few particularities which I saw in the film about the mixture that is being in Belgium and being in Brussels. They are two different things.
Erin, why do you think a boy like that goes to a school where they're teaching him in a different language than the one he uses every day? And what do you think that tells us about his character? And the fact that he skips that class that his mother has to sleep with men to pay for.
Because he's a little shit. But my guess would be he goes to that other school because his friends go there. Because he talks about his friend Jan that told him about sex when he was 10. He probably goes to go there with his friend, but doesn't appreciate what his mother does. Like, which is essential to the film. It's like nothing she does is ever quite good enough, and people don't appreciate all the work that she does. And so he goes to the school and then skips classes. Why? And I think it's because he's a little shit. I don't like that character.
Could that be the event that sets her off? Learning that?
It could be, but I don't think that's the event.
Because it's right after that she has to reach into the bowl and give him the money.
It's possible, but that's not how I saw it, especially with what Chantel.
Well, again, there's no right or wrong answers. I'm saying could that be possible? Again, we know the technically right answer is the organism thing because the director told us that. But I again, if it's not in the film and I don't know that, I have to go by what's actually on screen.
It's possible that and the conversations that they have when he's going to sleep are a big part of it. But
yeah, that's something I want to get to before we get to the controversy around this film on Sight and Sound is how weird that conversation is.
Yeah, it makes me wonder: does he know what she does? Does he know that she's got these clients every afternoon? And if
how does he think she makes the money to keep them in that apartment?
Probably thinks it's the widow's pension. She picks up a widow's pension from the post office. So the first time we see her go there, that's what she's doing. So I think he just thinks that's where the money comes from. I don't think he knows about. He might know about the prostitution part. I don't know. That's why the questions are so weird. It's like maybe he's figured it out, but doesn't want to say he knows, but he's kind of shaming her for it.
There is something going on in that conversation, and this is when I said I don't think I understand this film. These are the things that I'm talking about. There are things going on in that conversation that, and I don't think I'm being overly analytical, but there is something of the Freudian Oedipal complex going on, or there isn't, and this is something that's flipping that on its head. But there is something it is just a weird scene.
It's very weird. Both of those conversations are so freaking weird. Like, I feel like the first one is more exposition, like explaining who they are and why she got married and stuff like that, and giving us information about her character. But the second one is definitely more like, why are you talking about this?
If we take her at her word, she got married because she wanted to have a child.
Yeah, which I can relate to. I mean,
but the question is for what? Because she wanted someone whose life she could live for? Because that's what he does. She basically lives her life for her son, right?
Yeah,
that's what this whole regimen is about.
Yeah, that's the whole codependency thing, is like she lives for this kid who doesn't appreciate what she does, but depends on it. Like, if he had the option, he'd never move out because he's got someone to take care of him his whole life,
Would you?
That's the problem. She sets this up,
I don't even have to hang up my own coat or polish my own shoes.
Right.
And boy, and you get a nice veal dinner at least one day. I haven't had veal in I don't know how long.
To me, there are two mistakes here. Possibly one, this guy never takes a shower. We don't see any logical indication that allows the space for him to freshen up. I'm not complaining.
Sila, you raised a teenage boy.
Wait. No.
They're filthy.
No. I'm sorry. And the other one is the other mistake. I'm just calling it a mistake. That's just a label. Allow a certain space in which we can play with the possibilities of what is going on here that leads to the weird conversations or to the weird dynamic between the two. To be honest with you, and probably I'm not the only one going through this or who went through this, when I saw them making the bed the first time, I was very relieved to see that she's not going to lie down with him. But okay, should not be it. So what I'm driving at is that when I put certain things aside and I just label them mistakes, then I'm left with the film that I'm looking at and I'm trying to make sense of it, even the way it ends, thinking, okay, now in this condition, what is she waiting for? The man is in her bedroom and her son is coming home anytime now. Why isn't he there? And so at some point I realized the film is finished. I'm just waiting for the credits to roll, but I know it's finished. So I'm waiting. My logic kicks in and said, okay, what can we do with this? How can what's going in her mind for these last 5 minutes, just moving her face? What is she thinking about? Is she, sad? Is she confused? Has she given up completely and is
Why
just
isn't
waiting
she trying to
herself
dispose of the body?
Yeah. I mean, there are many, but I allow them to the space of creativity for whatever the artist is trying to convey or trying to insinuate. But the thing with the shower, that hit me a little bit too hard. And also, I want to have a little bit more that an interview 20 years later about the possibility that she had an orgasm in one of those
Well, no, actually, that's not from an interview. That's from the documentary that was shot while they were making the film. That is how she explains it to Seyrig, as far as motivation. And Delphine actually fights her on that, saying, "Isn't that what every woman wants?" And she said, "Not this woman."
Okay, so that brings me back to what I'm trying to share. And I'm having problems sharing it because it's not very clear in my head. There are too
many
layers.
Which I completely sympathize with. There's not, though, this film is not very clear in my head. And that's why I thought when Erin brought it up, maybe the three of us could figure this out.
Because everything is too distorted. The boy and Erin keeps saying, he's a piece of shit. And I don't disagree with that, but I don't think, and please don't take this out of secret. I don't think it's his fault. There's something going on that we don't know. There's something going on that leads her to lead a life like that, which is very, very typical, perfect Belgium. Everything is perfect. It's not a poor apartment, but it's actually social for Belgium levels. It's not for rich people at all. But it has a certain quality which is very, very proper for the German, for the Dutch. It's a very proper house. Everything is very clean. Everything is in its place. It's a typical perfection of not having a lot of money, but being proper.
But it's dark.
You
have that light coming in.
You will find that in
that's
Dublin.
Very, very all films shot in Brussels, especially.
The darkness you will find in Vienna. You will find in Brussels. You will find in Dublin. That is very typical of a very old tradition.
They don't know how to light rooms in
those.
Those
are old buildings. Those old buildings. The buildings we were looking at cannot have been built later than that was built before the war. I guarantee you that. That is not a new building.
And we could get stuck on this forever, and I'm afraid, but we are going to have to move on because and just say there are just parts of this film I'm not going to be able to understand, and I don't think rewatching it will answer. But back to because this when you were talking about when we were talking about how dark it is in there and how regimented, the fact that there is not a single note of a musical soundtrack on this film. You do hear music twice, but both times it's coming from the radio.
I love that. You know, I love that.
I knew you would. Go ahead, Erin.
I think it was a perfect choice to not have music, because music would have just taken away from the feel that we were supposed to have, which is just how everything is exactly this way. And we're drawn into this very small world. And if there was music, it would make the world feel bigger than it really is. Because in real life, we don't have music playing around us all the time as our soundtrack to life.
Yes.
And
And we are paying attention to what is, not to a background bullshit. And
yeah, exactly.
whenever they played music, I was really afraid at the beginning. I said, "Oh God, please don't tell me." When they started with Debussy, I said, "Oh wow, really? Do they have to go that low?" I hate that piece. I think everybody hates that piece except the people who love it.
I think it was chosen because of its familiarity. Because it would be something everybody would like recognize.
But I was very happy.
It wouldn't matter how little knowledge of classical music you have. You recognize that one piece.
But I was very happy to see you get to hear the sound of the paper, of the butter, of the meat. You even hear how
the brush dropping in when I was watching it in the theater echoes.
Yeah.
Because there's so little other sound.
When the egg is mixing with the mincemeat, I those sounds, and this is as you probably both well know, they did not invent that, but they made a very strong point, the Dogma 95 from Scandinavia, that they decided the only time that music is played is when somebody in the film is playing it. I found that perfect the way they used that, because there's so much sound.
Well, and we'll get to that when we start talking about how this film ended up the best film of all time on the Sight and Sound poll. In terms of, and also its inspiration on the slow move, or maybe, I'm not going to say inspiration, I'm going to say predicting, because not everybody involved in Dogma 95 or the slow cinema movement saw this film, but it was in the Zeitgeist. But we'll get to that. But just one more last point: the combination of the darker photography, beautiful, the very painterly way the scenes, especially the way she uses the rule of thirds, the long takes, the lack of editing, the lack of anything that physically moves you as a viewer through. I kind of almost heard a soundtrack in my head created by the same way you kind of hear music to go with a beautiful painting when you're at a museum. And I had mentioned to, maybe it was to you, Erin, I can't remember, but after it might have been to Yazzie, after my rewatching this film, I thought of the times where I went to art galleries and they had music playing over the intercoms, and how much that bugged me, because
that is horrendous.
And it would bug me because as I'm looking at an art piece, I've got a music in my head and you're playing over it in a way.
Yeah,
and I think that would have been what a soundtrack on this would have been like.
Yeah, exactly. The music sets the mood, and I don't think she wanted to set the mood in that way. I think she wanted to show us this woman's life and let us draw our own conclusions, let us figure out the mood. And I think it works perfectly.
And everything is so raw that you cannot paint it over with music.
So I think we're all going to agree that this is definitely a film worth 3 hours and 20 minutes of your life, and it was definitely worth watching. I think we'll also agree it probably would not be number one on our if we were asked by Sight and Sound. I don't think any of us would say this was the best film of all time. But let's move into how it ended up there. Now there is some controversy around it. Erin and I had a little back and forth before we recorded on this, which Erin was talking about. It was men misunderstanding the film, and I am one of those men who did not understand this film, so I'm not going. So I cannot judge. But there was an idea that this was maybe a DEI choice. We'd say today, they wouldn't have used that phrase back in 2022. Woke, post Me Too, had to have a female director, this and Bo Bremmel. And the film we'll be doing next week, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, all directed by female directors, ended up a lot higher on the list than people had expected. This was, I think, number 36 in the 2012 poll, and had moved all the way up to number 1, edging out both Vertigo and Citizen Kane, which were the reigning champions before. And of the 4 films that have been number 1, Bicycle Thieves, Citizen Kane, and Albert Hitchcock's Vertigo. This is for one thing the only one directed by a woman. I don't think that's the case, because if you look at the list of directors who put this on their list, this would have ended up, I think, 5 or 6, even if you hadn't taken the film critics, which they did. They opened up and they had more film critics than they had used to use for these polls. If you look at the rest of that list, 85 of the 100 films on that list, 85 of them were in that top 100 10 years ago. So it wasn't this huge shift. I think Sila kind of hinted at what caused this to move up, which is the adaptation of things like, Dogma 95 and the slow cinema movement, and of not just directors, but film critics really starting to appreciate the idea that films can move at life's pace, and this film being an exemplar of that, as opposed to the feminist. But I'll open it up. Was this a DEI choice? Do you think, or was there some artistic reason why right now this supersedes Bicycle Thieves, Vertigo, and Citizen Kane, which the previous generations had all said were the best film of all time?
There has been a spike in misogyny lately on social media, and now with the current administration in the White House. Women are losing rights. We just are. Trans folks, queer folks, women, people of color are all losing rights. And, the whole concept of DEI as being a bad thing, people complaining about this movie being number 1 because of DEI, that's part of the problem. That's an example of the problem. But there are other people that recognize this is a story people need to hear. People need to see this film and get a perspective they might not otherwise have, especially in the face of, this insane right-wing bullshit that's happening. I think that's part of it. But I also think that it's part of why it's a controversy and not just, oh, okay, this is new. That's my opinion.
I find it impossible to answer that question, because to me, first of all, I don't know what that list is about, what is it based on. I don't know. I'm not familiar with any lists. I don't care about any list from Rolling Stones or whoever the authoritarian power have to say what is good, or whoever votes for it. It makes no sense to me how even a great film like Citizen Kane can claim a first place when I think of all the films that I have seen and the many, many, many films I have never seen that are too great to just put under Citizen Kane. So for me, I really cannot answer that question. To me, it makes no sense to decide for anything being number 1.
So we'll take you off the Sight and Sound voting list then, Sheila. I do think that people who voted on this film not only get it in a way that I don't understand the film, but get what the meaning of that Sight and Sound poll is, which is what film transcends its genre, and put the largest impression on you as either a filmmaker or a film lover and affects what you watch as film. And this is that for them. And that would be my answer as to why a film like this and the film like the film we're going to be talking about next week, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, were on this list is because they transformed how you see other films. But on that note, we're not allowed to vote on this. But let's pretend like we were, and we had to put together a list of our top 10 favorite films of all time. This can be off the top of your head. It doesn't have to be rehearsed, and nobody's going to hold you to this. This could change tomorrow. But if Sight and Sound were to ask you for that, give me 10 films that you think would be in that rough list. We're going to start with Erin Brown.
Okay, so these are my top 10 in no particular order. The Princess Bride is on there because, I mean, it's a classic. I grew up with it. It's funny. It's got a great cast, great chemistry between the cast members. It's a goofy little story, and it turns fairy tales on their heads, but it's still charming and heartwarming and just a lot of fun. I watched it so many times as a kid that I still can recite the lines along with it if I watch it. The next one is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Another one from when I was a kid, another classic that it's everything you could want in an action movie. You got your hero doing, heroic things, and he's got this sidekick that's also a love interest, but she's not an idiot. You actually like her. I get so annoyed when I see a movie and there's like, oh, here's a love interest. You have to like her because she's a love interest. They don't give you a reason to. Karen Allen played Marion really, really well, and she was a lot of fun to watch. And I mean, Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. This is an iconic character. I put it above Last Crusade, which is my second favorite, because it's what started the whole series, and it's what set all of the hits in motion. It's going to hit all of these beats. All the films have to hit these beats, and you like it and you expect it, and they're done very well. And the villains are cartoony. I mean, who doesn't hate Nazis? Honestly, they're the best villains because they're so evil. All right, so the next one on the list is Tremors, which, again, from my childhood, it's a very tight script. It answers every question, and the monster follows its own rules. The questions it doesn't answer are questions that there was no reason for them to answer, like where do they come from? There's no way these people would know. All they know is they've got these worms underground jumping up and eating people. And it's a perfect mix of horror and comedy and action. And again, another great cast. And it's really funny. It's got some amazingly quotable lines. It's got a lot of rewatchability for me. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. The next would be Go West. It's a silent film. Buster Keaton, he was a master of comedy. And he also knew that you don't have to spoon feed your audience everything that they need to know. You tell your jokes and the right people will get it. And, if it makes you laugh, do it. If it doesn't make you laugh, why do it? It's not going to make the audience laugh either. So it's got all these goofy gags, but it's also got a story of this guy that's kind of a loser that, he has to leave his hometown and, get scammed out of his belongings by the guy that runs the shop that he's selling everything to. He's got no friends. the character's name is Friendless, and he's trying to figure out what to do with himself. And he ends up working on a ranch out west. And it's got a bunch of very silly gags, but it's also a little bit heartwarming because, when he realizes that this cow that's following him around actually likes him, it's the first time he's ever had a friend, and it just kind of breaks your heart a little bit in this goofy comedy. Okay, next up is Midnight Run, which I believe is from 1989. It's got Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin, and it's another tight script, very quotable. Really, I mean, Dennis Farina as the villain is perfect. And Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin have incredible chemistry together, and they're really funny. And the way Charles Grodin plays his character, he never gives anything away. You don't. Over the course of the film, De Niro is opening up about his life and everything going on with him, with his ex-wife and his daughter, and why he doesn't work in Chicago anymore. He's opening up and telling all of these things about himself, and you never learn a single thing about Charles Grodin's character that makes any difference at all. He likes a certain kind of potatoes. He knows how to say hello in various languages. And that's really all you get from him. And it's just so brilliantly done. It's so much fun to watch. So next up is The Godfather, which is the most cliched one on the list, because who doesn't like The Godfather?
I don't.
So let me tell you why I do like it. It might change your mind. I don't know. It's really down to Al Pacino's performance. I don't think I would like it as much if it wasn't him in that role. The biggest thing that stands out to me is that you see him change over the course of the film, but when he goes back to Sicily and he gets married and then his wife is killed, he doesn't smile again for the rest of the film. And that's a choice, and he sticks with it, and it shows how much he's changed since the beginning of the film. And I just thought that was really well done. It was a really good choice. Moving on. The next one is Boy. I think that's my favorite Taika Waititi film.
We have a whole episode on what a great movie that is.
Yeah. So I could go into more detail about that, but I'm going to keep it simple. I think it's my favorite because of how personal it feels to Taika, how honest it feels. And he's got a great way of directing kids. He's always casting these kids that are perfect for the role, and he can direct them into great performances. And not a lot of directors can do that. And it just feels like a very personal story because he based it partially on his own life. And that just makes it really work for me. Next up is another Taika Waititi film, of course, but it's also got Jermaine Clement involved, so I kept it on the list. I didn't want it to be fully Taika Waititi films. What We Do in the Shadows. And I love that film because it's so freaking funny. It is like exactly my sense of humor.
And, I'm going to ask you to save that for the first Sunday or the first week in October, because, of course, that's the film we're starting spooky season with.
Yep. So just the very basic things on here.
So stay tuned.
So stay tuned, yeah. I will give more information about why I love this film. Okay, moving on to the next film, The Big Lebowski. You'll notice there's a comedic theme to everything I've picked so far, except The Godfather. There's nothing funny in The Godfather. That's just
like your opinion, man.
Yeah. Again, very quotable. And again, I don't think I would like this.
I find the death of I laugh out loud at the death of Don Vito every time I watch The Godfather with the kid spraying.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. I don't think it's meant to be funny, but it's okay. Again, downer from beginning to end. But The Big Lebowski is not a downer. It's very silly. It's a fun mystery. It's like a send-up of like old school 40s mystery movies with this lunatic as your lead, this burned out hippie that wants nothing to do with any of this, but he's stuck in the middle of it anyway, and he hates the fucking Eagles, and I hate the fucking Eagles. It's very relatable.
And I hate the fucking Eagles, man.
But it's again,
I think Sila, how are you on the Eagles? Do you hate the fucking Eagles?
I have never had any hatred for teams.
This aggression will not stand.
Donnie, you're out of your element. You're out of your element, Donnie.
Why do you have to make everything such a big fucking disaster?
I'm sorry.
It could be a quote off.
I hate that.
You hate what?
Making everything a fucking disaster.
So this could be a quote off all day long. So I'm going to have to cut it there. But it's so, the cast again is perfect. I love, I love Jeff Bridges and John Goodman and Steve Buscemi in those roles as those three idiots at the center of this stupid mystery that still turns out to be an incredibly entertaining film. I love the Coen brothers. Not everything they do, but when they hit for me, they hit. And finally, To Be or Not to Be, the Mel Brooks version, which I know sacrilege, it's not the Jack Benny version, but that's the one I've seen. And it's got Anne Bancroft. She is incredible. She was incredible. Anything she did, she was amazing. And in this film, she's so funny and so classy and just, and they've got chemistry together because, of course, they were married. But I think she brings the ridiculousness down to a more normal level. And this is a film that needed to be more normal and not Mel Brooks ridiculous. It's also the first film that showcased that queer folks were persecuted as well by the Nazis. And that's important because people forget that. And, we're seeing a recurrence of that.
I think the Ernst Lubitsch film made that point very clear, despite the. But yeah, but that would be.
They can be as. I
But that
don't
would
think
just
he
be
could have been as
my opinion, man.
Yeah. That's just your opinion, man. I grew up with the Mel Brooks version, and I love it. It's. I tried. I never really got a chance to watch the original. I probably need to and compare it to see if it's how it compares. But
Yeah, I have a feeling it would be your favorite film of all time instead, if you were to, because it has the Lubitsch touch.
True,
but
it's possible. But
they call me concentration camp Earhart, eh?
Charles Durning in the Mel Brooks version was so amazing for that. Again, it's the casting. When you've got the right cast, you've got a good chance of it being a really great movie. I know there are movies with great casts that really suck. I know that can happen, but it helps a lot to have the right people in the roles. And that was in no particular order. So I didn't end with my number one film. I ended with
Yeah, we're doing this off the cuff, so no, yeah. And if you ask her tomorrow, it might be 10 different films.
It will absolutely change because there's stuff on there that I didn't get to mention, like Hear My Song or Wall-E or Jojo Rabbits. But I'm going to leave those for another time. So turning the microphone over now to whoever's next.
All right, Sila, if you had a top 10 film, we realize this is off the top of your head and could change tomorrow, but go ahead. What would your top 10 be if you were writing into Sight and Sound today?
I will mention 10, but with the flexibility of 3 or 4 that I want to give honorable mention to, because I really cannot. And like Erin said,
there's no rules, man. There's no rules, man.
There's no particular order. But I would say that the first one I wrote down has a meaning because it's the first one that popped to my head because I'm just so amazed by this film, Gotland. Pulgarson, I think is his name, the director. It came out in 2023 or 22. I just love the photography, the cinematography, the brutality of the film combined with the beauty of the film. It's a very brutal film. It's basically about, I'm not going to go into details, but Gotland is definitely one of the best films I've ever been impressed by. Life is Beautiful from Roberto Benigni. I just find amazing the movie in itself, but also the idea to dare to put this topic into a humorous movie and the way he does it, I find really amazing. I've been naming this film as one of my favorites for a couple of decades now. I chose from the Bergman compendium, I have chosen for this list Cries and Whispers. I cannot go with Persona. I think there's still too much experiment in my system. Cries and Whispers I find very exceptionally well done, even though I love Autumn Sonata. Nosferatu the Vampire, namely 1979 Herzog. I really like that film.
Episode 3 of season 2 of World Cinema History. We do all of the not all 3 Nosferatus with Sila Blume.
Yes, and I watched all 3 of them, and for me, the first one from the 20s, I think, is very, very good. The last one from 24, I did not like. Although it had some information that I found very crucial, very important. But as a poetically, and the acting of Klaus Kinski is just incredibly good, very, very good. I really like that film. Another film that I have been listing for many years is The Sea Inside, Mar Adentro, with Javier Bardem. The Elephant Man from David Lynch, extremely poetic, and to me, it's a very humanistic
We have a great
film.
episode on that in season one of
Correct.
UK cinema history, which was just you and me, Sila, if I remember correctly.
That's I'm not sure, but yes. I love a lot of films from Takeshi Kitano, but I need to mention Dolls, like a doll. The story about this man who has been promised that he's supposed to marry this woman, an old love of his, and then his boss says that he should marry his daughter, and he agrees with that. But because of that situation, his original girlfriend is completely crazy, and the film is about how they travel through Japan together to take care of her. It's a very, very poetic movie, very beautiful. I think Yamamoto is that designer. What they wear is from Yamamoto. It's a very, very beautiful film. The Purple Rose of Cairo was logically an influence from Yassi, and I have to name that as one of these 10. Volver from Pedro Almodóvar. Don't need to say too much about that film. It's a fantastic film, colorful, funny, weird. The woman coming back from the death and her daughter smelling her. It's just a very, very fun movie, but very profound and very artistic. And another German, the acting, not the director. Zone of Interest for me is a very, very, very good film. And the ones I want to just mention as worthy of being...
Real quick, Zone of Interest, we have an episode on from season 1 as well, from the UK cinema history days.
Well, the next 4 that I'm adding, 2 of them are also from... I learned of these films through you. I'll just give the 4 titles. Tess, Dancer in the Dark with Björk from Lars von Trier. Taxi Driver, I think it's a very good film. And Caravaggio. So those will be the honorable mentions in addition to the 10.
Excellent. Thank you, Sila. And we have episodes on Kess and also on and Caravaggio. We have 2 episodes on for some reason. No, because we had some technical issues. We ended up re-recording it, and it ended up with a completely different episode. So we decided to keep both. Great list there, Sila. And since we're doing this off the cuff, I won't repeat any of your choices. But if I were to do a top 10, I would have to put Ingmar Bergman's Persona on the list. To me, it's not an experimental film. To me, each and every one of those frames from the beginning, where he's basically, it feels like, maybe he's showing off with the gouging of the lamb's eye and the child in the morgue, and all of that moves the story ahead. And then the little things, the breaking of the film in the middle because the tension becomes too much. The merging of the faces as we ourselves feel the 2 characters merging. The B.B. Anderson's long monologue as Liv Ullmann just sits silently listening, and the wonderful story of her little sexual escapade on the beach. Bergman himself intruding. Every one of those things. But it is as beautifully photographed a film as I've ever seen. I would put Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion would be for sure on my list when we talk about performances. The American silent film star of German origin, perhaps. We don't know, because there are rumors that he was born in Minnesota and just adapted. But Erich von Stroheim, as a German officer, absolutely commands every frame that he's in on that film. But the pure humanity of that film and its actual translation as, the large illusion, the big illusion, based on this illusion that somehow or another, in war they are all equal, and that class doesn't exist in a foxhole. And it to me is just a powerful piece of humanity, but also a very painterly film in terms of the way it's framed. Of course, Renoir was the son of the great Impressionist painter, and it shows. It is absolutely an immaculate film. Another French film I would put would be Marcel Carné's Children of Paradise, made during the French occupation by Germany in World War II. Absolutely gorgeous film, but also filled with great performances. And unlike films like Gone with the Wind or epics like Ben-Hur, it never loses its humanity. It is the most human of epics that I've seen, and I've seen it tens of times, and not a moment of it ever gets old. If we're talking about French film, which I make fun of French film a lot, but there are a lot of great ones, and I would have to put Jean Cocteau's version of the Orpheus tale, Orphée, in which he brings it up to date, not just because of the poetry of his camera, things like having people go through a mirror and using water to represent the mirror. The gates of hell are guarded by men and women in black on motorcycles, all clad in leather. Every moment of that film is just picture perfect, but it is through the eyes of a poet, and it is one of the great experiences of all time. Not just one of the great films of all time, but one of the great pieces of any media that I've ever seen. I would have to put a film we did an episode on by Orson Welles of Citizen Kane fame, which Citizen Kane is one of the great films. This just happens to be a film of his that I love better. Chimes at Midnight, in which he telescopes the Falstaff character from the Henry the Fourth Part 1 and 2, and with little bits of Henry V and the Merry Wives of Windsor, to create a beautiful portrait of the Falstaff character, which he plays himself, but filmed in that distinctive Orson Welles style with wonderful black and white photography. The downside, he made the film on such a low budget and over such a long period of time. The soundtrack is a bit of a mess, but it's been completely restored in 2012, and if you ever get to see the Criterion version of it, it is an absolute masterpiece. I would have put Caravaggio on this list, but since Sila has already brought it up, I will bring up another film that we did the same season as Caravaggio from England, and that would be by our Lord and Savior Lindsay Anderson, and that would be his film If, which of course was the premiere of the actor Malcolm McDowell, which explores both the idea of where a revolutionary government comes from and also how much it just sucks to be a teenager in school, all in one beautifully surreal document. I have seen that film probably as many times as I've seen any other film. And each and every time it reveals something new to me. And it is also, of the films, probably the best directed film of any, just in terms of choice of where a camera goes and eliciting the best performance and line delivery scene by scene of any of the films on this list. Simon of the Desert is of course going to be on this list. I often say it's my favorite film of the time. Of course.
We're shocked. We're shocked you picked this one.
Of course, Luis Buñuel, 45 minutes short. It was originally supposed to be part of one of those anthology films. The film fell apart. And because he only has 45 minutes to fill in, and they didn't have the budget to stretch it out to a full-length film, there is not a wasted frame in it. And every moment from Simon descending one pillar to ascend another, to the ending in modern day New York at a club listening to a band perform The Radioactive Flesh, is both hilarious and yet deeply disturbing at the same time. I consider it by far one of the great films of all time. On the opposite end of the extreme, I would put Ozu's great film Tokyo Story, and there are so many Ozu films that Floating Weeds, so many Ozu films that could make this list, but Tokyo Story is my favorite in terms of how it can tell a simple story completely visually, and how the simplest of events can break and rend your heart. And also, it contains some of the best performances ever recorded on film. What is that? That would be 8. So I would add as a 9th film Fellini's 8.5, which is both in its dreamlike way and yet its simplicity one of the best films about what we now call narcissistic personality, and yet also about how humbling and insecure it is to be an artist, and how narcissism is actually all about your own insecurity. It contains some of the scariest and yet most visually compelling dream sequences ever recorded on film, and it's a comedy. Fellini put a note next to every camera to remind anyone who was on it, remember, this is a comedy, and it achieved that in every step. My next film, also from Italy, is a film we did recently on here, which would be Mario Monticelli's The Organizer, which is also a comedy, a very broad comedy about unions at the turn of the century in Turin, which just, besides absolutely for sure watch that film, listen to our episode, because I also think that's one of the best episodes that we ever did. And then to finish off the list, and my final pick would be another Shakespeare adaptation, which it would be Prospero's books, which with John Gielgud as Prospero, this adaptation of The Tempest, which is, to me, as good or better than anything short of Orson Welles for Shakespeare on screen. The director, Peter Greenaway, whose films we've discussed, we did The Draftman's Contract, I know for sure, but I believe we also did The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and Her Lover, although I don't know if that was for UK cinema history or for another room. It is a director that I'm actually usually hit or miss on, but here, his use of tape box technology, his use of editing, and just the beauty of Shakespeare's language and the beauty of Shakespeare's storytelling, combined with his directorial genius and the narration of just John Gielgud's voice. I would say that would be the last day. And again, this list could change tomorrow. So that's what we would vote for if we were on the Sight and Sound panel. But we're not. And the people who were on the Sight and Sound panel instead, of course, chose Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, Milcat Revant, Bruxelles. And on that note, I'm just going to ask, starting with Erin Brown, for your final thoughts on Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, Milcat Revant, Bruxelles. Erin?
This is one that just stuck with me. I watched it and then I just kept thinking about it. And that's in a good way, because I've had films that I watch and I don't like them, and the stuff I don't like sticks with me, and it's like disturbing. But this is not that. This is, I had so many questions, And it was amazing how it just draws you into her world, and you see things as they just start to spiral out of control until the final climax. It was amazing.
Sila Blume.
Well, for this, I will just read the notes that I had taken. Luckily, most of the notes we did not touch upon, and I did not mention them because we were busy with other things. But this is a short list, and I think it's interesting. She winds the alarm each time, but never do we hear the sound of it in the morning. In 1975, there was not this attention to domestic coffee, especially not by a poor, struggling woman with a child. So the focus that we see that she dedicates to one of the times she makes coffee, that was non-existent in that time anywhere in the world. This was way before the explosion of Starbucks. And at home, there was nobody making coffee like this. So I found that very interesting, the detail about coffee making. She looked often to the side, at times downward, but never anywhere near the lens. The approach to music and sound, there is a highly important display of being. Music is played when music is played. Eggs are wet on mincemeat when they are mixed on with mincemeat. And the last point, the acting discards drama. The cinematography discards of drama.
Thank you, Sila. I'm going to say that I wanted so badly to dislike this movie.
I think that's impossible. It is such a good movie.
Exactly. I wanted so much not to like this movie because it represents everything that I supposedly dislike in cinema. I can remember Pauline Kael saying about later Robert Bresson movies like Balthazar that they were dumb, and thinking, exactly, I don't need to see every single detail of every single shot. I don't need to see the door open, what happens on the other side. This is what editing is for, etc., etc., etc. And also, John Simon jokingly said that later Bresson films were also dumb in the other form, in that nobody's speaking, which normally I don't even like Tom and Jerry cartoons because they don't talk. But I loved this movie, and it is not because it somehow transformed my view. I still don't particularly care for slow cinema. I still don't enjoy Andrei Tarkovsky the way that most people do. I still am not the biggest fan of Dogma 95 with their moving cameras and their you pick up sound wherever you can or what have you, because to me they're not done well. But this is done at such a high level and is done and it is so beautiful in terms of the painterliness of these shots that, if anything, it felt short to me because I wanted to inhabit these people's lives even longer. And to me, that's a sign of a great film. And so, on that note, I'm going to go around and ask each of you to give us briefly where people can find you online, starting with Erin Brown. Where can people find you on the internet?
I'm on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy, and I'm on YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions.
Sila Blume, same question.
I could be found, for the most part, on silablume.life. And I have a couple of other accounts, but that's where I do most of my work for online.
And you can catch World Cinema History on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube at World Cin Hist. And if you want to follow me or stalk me or tell me I mispronounced Jeanne Dielman 23 Quai du Commerce 1400 Bruxelles, I'm at ETROMMATER on the artist formerly known as Twitter. Thanks again. Join us next week for Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Have a good one.